Welcome back to another construct video, and I think it's about time we learned how to rebind our controls in-game, and then if we wanted to, shut the whole game down, load it back up, and keep our new controls. So, let's get started. So, first thing you need today is just some sort of game that you want to add your key bindings to. I've gone really simple. I've created a little car park, put a car in, and if you're curious, my car has just two behaviors on it, scroll to and the car behavior. The main thing for your car is you want to turn off default controls because we're going to add our own logic for the controls. What I'm going to do is just lock this layer now and create a brand new layer above it. Now this is going to act as a bit of a HUD today, but you could add your control options to a brand new menu or a brand new layout completely. We'll go really simple. We're just going to add them to a parallax layer. So I'm going to click on layer 1, parallax change to 0 times 0. And this just means whatever I put now in this dotted grid, it's a bit hard to see, but there's my dotted grid there, will remain on the screen at all times, just like you would expect a HUD to in an actual game. So let's start by adding our objects. We need two main objects to get us started. So the first one that we need is the text box. And this is going to be the control name. So this is going to tell us what the different controls are in our particular game. So in my game, I've got the option to go forwards, backwards, turn left, and turn right. So step 1 done. Next we need to add is our second main object that we need today, which is going to be a button. So we're just going to call this controls button. Click anywhere, and we need 4 different buttons. Now it doesn't matter what these buttons say. If you want to add in some default text for the default directions, you can, but all the button names are going to change when we start playing our game. Final thing we need from this screen then is to just go to our button and we're going to add an instance variable. And the instance variable is going to be called index. And I'm not going to explain this too much yet because it'll be easier to explain when we get onto that section. But all you need to do for now is just label your buttons from 0, 1, 2, and 3. So each button has its own index value. That's it for the layout side, but before we jump into the event sheet, we actually need to create a brand new file. So on the right hand side, we're going to go down to Files, right click, and add an array. Now before we do anything with the array, we should probably rename it. So I'm just going to rename it to controls. And we're just going to change the width to how many different controls the player can change. So in my game, there's 4 different controls. And what we can also do is actually rename each of these to be the different directions. So I can press forwards. I can rename this one to backwards, turn left, and turn right, in the exact same order that we did with our buttons. Now, even though we've renamed these still have the value of 0, 1, 2, and 3, which matches up to 0, 1, 2, and 3. So hopefully you get why those numbers were important now. Next thing we need to do is actually put in our default controls. Now, we can't just write W to say we want to press the W key to move forward. We actually need to put in the key code. So there's lots of different documents you can find online. I'll try and remember to link one in the description, but essentially these are your keyboard codes, and when you press a button, it's actually sending this code forward, and that's how the computer knows which button you've pressed. For my game, I actually want to use the arrows by default, so I need these keyboard codes. I need to make sure I put them in the right order. So 38 for the up arrow, 40 for the down arrow, then to 37, then to 39. And just after a double check, I'm happy with those. So now I'm done with my array. Moving back to our layout then, we can add in our final objects, and we need to add in an array. And again, this can just be controls or key binding or whatever you want to call it. I'll call it controls. I'm going to add in a new object as well, and the final object we need for today is called Ajax. Now Ajax is just a way that we can read files. It has some other amazing functions as well, but the main one we want it for is be able to take our array from our files and load it into our array called controls. Going into our event sheet then, first thing we want to do is load the array that's located in our files into the array that's located in our objects. So I'm going to add an event, system, scroll down to on start of layout, add an action, and we're going to go for Ajax, request project file, and controls JSON. Don't really worry about giving it a tag, it's the only one we're doing. If you had multiple files, you then might want to give a tag to each one, but we'll just hit done. We can then add an event, Ajax, and then we want to put on complete. Tag again is going to be empty. Add an action, controls, then hit the load button, and we can do ajax.lastData. So now it's loaded in our array. So before we do the next bit, we actually need to add one more object, one I've just forgot about, which is just the keyboard. So I'm just going to add a new object. You can also use a controller for this. The logic's exactly the same, but you'd use the gamepad instead of the keyboard. Let's add the keyboard in. Then we can click on the side of this too, add in either a blank sub-event or a sub-event, and then we're going to go to System, and we want this option called For Each. This is just a loop that repeats for every single object that we've got of a particular type. So in this case, I want to repeat for each of my buttons. And what I want to do is I want to just set the text on each button. So set text, and what we're going to do is we're going to take keyboard, dot, and string from key code. Now we talked about every key having a key code. It also has a string to tell you what that key actually is. So 37 would be left arrow. It's actually represented with the left arrow, not the name left arrow. And same for if we did 49, it would be represented by the string of 1. And then just in brackets, what value do we want to get? Well, we want to get the array value that we had. So to get the array value, we do controls, and then dot at, and then in brackets, we're just going to do loop index. Close both brackets, and your text should go a different color. And once it's changed color, you can hit done, and we're ready to do a test. Now if I hit run, you'll see our buttons have now changed to the 4 different arrows. Now, if we try and drive, nothing will happen. So let's actually set up so we can drive our car now. So we're going to add an event, keyboard, and instead of going is key down like we normally would, we're going to check is key code down. Now for the key code itself, we're going to use everything that we've done before, which is controls.at. And then you just need to remember which value you're getting. So in this case, I know that value 0 is to move forwards, 1 is backwards, 2 is turn left, 3 is turn right. And for our action, in my case, I'm just going to go to my car, simulate controls, and get it to accelerate. And then what I'm going to do is just copy and paste this for our different directions, changing the 0 to a 1, and changing the accelerate to brake. And there we go, I've just done that for the other directions as well. So now we can move our car based on whatever controls we've got in our array. Nothing too exciting actually, we've took a lot of events to do something that's really simple to do. So now we actually need to rebind these keys. So we're going to add an event, and we're going to go to controls button, check if we've clicked that button, and then we're going to add an action. So first thing we're going to do is take the button and we're going to set the text, and I'm just going to set it to be 3 dots. This for me strikes you can rebind now because I've just put in 3 dots to say change it to whatever you want. And I'm going to hit done, and then we're going to add an action underneath that. We're going to go back to our button, and we want to do this set unfocused. If we don't click on this option, when we try and interact with the game, we have to click back on the game first to interact with it. So if we just set unfocused, that should fix that. So now we've got this set up, we now need to actually check if they're pressing a certain key. So we're just going to add an event, keyboard, and we're just going to say on any key pressed. We're also going to add an action so we can get the button that we want to assign this to. Button, compare text, and we want any button that has the text of 3 dots. Next, we're going to start with our array, so we're going to go down and set x. Now to get the x value, we're just going to take our control button, get its index value that we set up earlier, and then change the value to keyboard dot, and then last key code. This will take the last key code pressed on the keyboard, and again, this triggers the moment that any key was pressed. We're then going to add another action, and for this other action, we want to actually set the text back for the new button. And instead of actually clicking on add action, we'll take this bit of code that we did before and just copy it down below. Now this code's nearly finished, but we've also got the problem that we can actually select multiple buttons. So we need a way to do a reset on the other buttons. We might also decide that we want to change our mind and we don't want to change the keyboard control, and having to change to a different key and then change it back is really annoying. So I'm going to show you a quick fix for that as well. So we're going to add an event, control button on clicked. We're then going to right click where this green arrow is and make this an OR block. Then we can add another condition, go to our keyboard, and we can say on key pressed, and we want the escape key. Now if we try and press the escape key, it will just leave us out of this menu, so we actually have to go down to our special keys here and press escape, press OK, and done. We're then going to add in a blank sub event, double click on the blank sub event, and we'll go down to system, and we're looking for an option called pick all. Now, normally when we run this button.click, we're now only talking about one button. So anytime we want to change any action to the button, it's referring to the one we clicked on. If we add this pick all, it's now referring to all buttons. So we can go to our control buttons, press OK and done. And we want to take the same bit of code that we copied before and copy it down below. The final thing we need to do with this bit of code is just move it to before we click on the first button. So this is a really simple soft reset system. So we're going to click on a button and it's going to trigger two sections of code. The first section of code that it triggers resets all buttons back to default. In this case, I'm just resetting their text back to whatever they are in the array. The second action then just looks at the button we clicked on and then changes the action for that. We're also checking if we press escape, and this will just reset all buttons back without checking the next bit of line as well. The final thing we want to do is on this any key pressed, we can actually add a new action here, keyboard, and then we can say key code is down and we want key code 27. We're then going to right click and invert. If you're curious what key code 27 is, it is the escape key. So it's just another check to see, have you pressed escaped? Okay, then ignore this action. And before we do a test, I've realized that I've made just a bit of a mistake, so we're just going to go on to this line of code. So this is where we pick all control buttons after we check the on click or escape. And it's going to set in the loop index. All we want to do is take the button index, so control button dot index. And I've also done the same for this particular one as well. So again, this should not be loop index. This should be controls button dot index instead. Now let's do a test. So first of all, we can move the car now, which is something we couldn't do before because we turned default controls off. I'm just using the arrow keys to move the car. If I want to change a control, I can click on it. 3 dots appear. If I press escape, it actually goes back. If I decide to commit to the changes, I can press any other key, and now it's set to W. And you can actually see as well that when I press the key, it's still moving the car. So this is something you might want to set up where it disables the player's controls for a little bit while you're setting the key binding so they're not moving around. But if I press S, you'll see the car move backwards slightly, just as proof actually that I'm pressing these particular keys. And then if we close it and load it back up, unfortunately it goes back to our original controls. So let's go for one more fix on how we can keep these controls for our next playthrough. So first thing we want to do is right click on object types, add a new object, and we need local storage. Press insert, and now we're ready to move on to the next section. So first thing we're going to do is go to the on start of layout. I'm going to add an action underneath the Ajax. This is going to move, but we'll keep it there for now. And we'll start with a little bit of tediousness. We're just going to go to local storage, and we're going to do this check if item exists. I'm going to leave the key blank, but you can add in a key name if you've got multiple items you're getting from local storage. Just going to hit done. We're then going to add an event onto our local storage, and we've got this option called is item missing. So on item missing, again, leave your key blank if you've done the same as me. I'm just going to drag this to the very top just because it helps with my logic of the order, but it doesn't actually matter which order you go for. And if the item is missing, then we'll do our Ajax and we'll get the controls from our file. On Ajax complete, we then set the value of each of the buttons. Now we also need to check what happens if you have got controls already in there. So we're going to go to local storage, and we've got this option called on item exists. Again, I'm going to keep the key blank. I'm going to move this. I'll do this after the Ajax, and then if the item exists, we can then go to local storage, get item, and again leave that blank. I wish we didn't have to go through this extra step. It's just a bit tedious, but there we go. And then local storage, on item get, again, leave that blank if you've done the same as me. Scroll to the top, and then the final bit we want to do is we want to take our array, load, and we're going to do our local storage dot item value. So this will get the item from our local storage, which we haven't actually saved yet, but this will be a JSON file, just like we did with the Ajax. Now, once we've set up the array, we also need to do the same thing we did before, which is set all the button names. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it below. Make sure this goes in as a blank sub-event, just like so. And then that is the load system complete. Probably the most complicated part of this video. We also need the save system, and you'll be glad to hear the save system is really, really simple. We go down to the bottom where we set our different key bindings, and every time we change the key bindings, we want to do a save. So we just add an action, local storage, set item, leave the key blank, and we're just going to take our array, so controls dot as JSON, and that's it. Final thing I'm going to do is just tidy up this code a little bit by adding some comments. So now you can see that our code is split into 3 sections. First section is actually loading controls either from the file or from our local storage. Second section is actually moving the player, and our third section is rebinding the controls. Again, you can remove those sections to any order you want, or you can move them to a different event sheet. But let's do a test. So first of all, you can see that I've got the controls of up, down, left and right like we've had this whole time. I'm going to reset them to W, A, S and D so I can use those as my new controls instead. And then I'm going to close it. Normally I'd actually edit out this bit of me changing between the windows, but I'm going to keep it in just to show you this works. And there's our new controls, and we can actually move around with these as well. So there you have it. A new way to rebind your controls in Construct with not many lines of code. But that's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next one.